I am on day 2 of my period. And I don't think that you need to have a period to know exactly what the build-up can be like sometimes. Cramps, bloating, occasional irritability, wanting to eat everything in the house. Now, I'm wondering if anybody listening to me saying that I am literally on my period right now felt even a little bit uncomfortable. And my guess is that if you do, it's because of the social stigma that surrounds menstruation in society. And period stigma is a very, very, very powerful mechanism unless we actively oppose it. Period stigma acts as a barrier to health, gender equality, and empowerment for girls, women, and all people that menstruate globally. Addressing it is crucial to improve the quality of life. For example, when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s in the UK, it was gross, really, to have a period. It was terrifying, the idea of bleeding through in PE at school. It's no surprise. Like, some people have a very, very painful period. And some people experience body dysmorphia, grief through being potentially on a fertility journey, and so many more stories and experiences. Yet, in other parts of the world, and in Native American tradition, it really was usual for groups to celebrate the ritual of menstruation. In her Blood is Gold, Lara Owen writes about the Navajo group, who do still practice this ritual. For days, extended family members will gather and celebrate the fact that the girl who has started her period now has the power to create new life, honouring this experience. Now, let's take a look at where we are today in the UK, in UK society. 2% of medical research funding goes into reproductive health. 2%. And in the workplace, women report that if they had a period-related issue at work, that they felt it would be trivialised. And if we take it into the household, 97% of us have a TV, which means we have access to soaps, reality TV shows, dramas, that are written a lot of the time to reflect our experiences, the human experiences, relationships. Yet, there are so few references to menstruation. Why is this? I want to reference Carrie. It's a horror film from 1976. Carrie starts her period while she's at school, and she is horrifically bullied for it. The other kids pour pig's blood over her head, a bucket of pig's blood. Now, if we partner that with 2017 being the first time that a period advert depicted blood in its natural colour of red instead of this fluorescent, strange blue liquid, it really makes us think about, like, how do we look at menstrual blood in society? How do we feel about it? Why do we shy away from it? Now, in face of this, the silence and the negative references of menstruation, I created a community online to challenge this stigma. Imagine a space where we can learn to harness our hormones, and the power of telling our stories is profound, where we can laugh, we can cry, and we can celebrate all of it together. I believe that stories have the power to transform our lives and also deeply connect us to each other and understand each other, especially when it's about conditions that can affect so many of us, that are barely talked about and also not easily diagnosed. For example, hearing from a woman in the community that lives with PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's a medical condition that shows up in the premenstrual phase of the menstrual cycle, which is pre-period. To live with PMDD often means suicidal ideation at this particular week of the month. It can mean so many uncomfortable symptoms that are very, very debilitating for people with PMDD. Now, this community member shared her experience of living with PMDD and then going on her pregnancy journey and how she was symptom-free during this journey. And sharing this in the community gave others the opportunity that do have PMDD to know that it is possible to go through this process without this pain and this discomfort, and to know, perhaps most powerfully, that our bodies go through cycles and they're not in their set state. So witnessing this can also be very empowering, not only for the individual sharing their story, sharing their truth, but for others that are also potentially in the dark around their own bodies. An example of a TV show that does depict menstruation, I think, brilliantly, is the incredible I May Destroy You by Michaela Cole. It was released onto the BBC in 2020, and so casually does such wonders for the stigma around periods. There are two scenes I want to tell you about. The first, Arabella, our lead character, is on the toilet. It's not a big deal, she's chatting with a friend, but we see a menstrual pad in her pants. Now, that was the first time I'd ever seen that on TV. And what it means is that was deliberate. That was a deliberately, casually appearing mention of menstruation. The costume department would have had to dress that into her knickers. Like, does wonders. And then the next scene was a period sex scene, where Arabella is in bed with her lover, and he removes her tampon, which comes out with a blood clot. But he looks at it in awe. And once again, this just strips any of the ideas around disgust or that periods and blood, the natural source of life, should be hidden away. A brilliant and unashamed, honest image of periods. In my 20s, I struggled a lot with anxiety. I did live a pretty chaotic life. I freelanced a lot in the film industry, moved around a lot, moved home a lot. And eventually, it all took its toll on my health. The anxiety was worse than ever, and it really started to frighten me. I knew I needed to get a grip of it. So I went on an absolute deep dive into research, and I found menstrual cycle awareness. Menstrual cycle awareness teaches us about the hormonal phases of a cycle, that there is more going on than a period, so more than 7 days. And this is something I did not know until I was 26 years old, as someone that had been having periods for over a decade. And learning that my hormones went up and down each week, they ebbed and flowed, actually changed my life. It was very, very transformative to know that from week to week, it was normal to feel different. And that noticing how you feel means you can work in flow with your own energy and not burn out as one of the results. I tracked my cycle for a while based on looking at my hormones, but also looking into and reading a lot about the inner seasons model. Now, this was pioneered by Alexandra Pope and Stjani Wurlitzer from the Red School, and they describe it as the menstrual cycle is a microcosm of nature. So if you imagine winter, the energy and the essence of winter is what we may feel when we are in our menstrual phase. And then the energy builds as our estrogen builds, just as we start to feel like we are like spring. The plants are coming up, we're feeling more energized because our hormones are lowest during menstruation. And then it builds up to ovulation, our peak phase of estrogen, which is our communication hormone, and into the luteal phase, where we go a bit more into ourselves and we can really harness the power of editing and focusing and clarity. Now, this is something I've been practicing for over 6 years now, but you don't need to do it for that long to get an idea of how it might work for you if you have a cycle. I started to see patterns emerge within 3, and that is where I managed to really understand where my anxiety lived, and it was in my luteal phase. The education around this meant that I could transform my life because I had a better idea about who I was and why my body and my mind was behaving like this. It was hormonal, as well as really take notice into who was I spending time with, what was I doing, how busy was I, where was I spending my energy. So I want to just urge you, if you have the opportunity to think about sharing this information with anyone that has a cycle and that might be hitting difficulties with it, could this support your menstrual cycle too? Now, menstrual cycle awareness is everybody's business. Let's have this conversation openly so much more. Let's write it widely into media and pop culture. Let's talk about it across dinner tables with our friends, our kids, our colleagues. And also, let's talk about it in unconventional spaces, like the workplace. I often think how men and non-menstruating people can benefit from menstrual cycle awareness too. And I think that with everyone's awareness, it can reduce discrimination, support employee retention, and enhance workplace culture. Research actually shows leaders who prioritize building good relationships, having compassion, being kind, actually do better. It raises the productivity and well-being of the whole team. Good relationships include compassion and understanding. And this can really help to fight the menstrual taboo. But there is progression here. Spain was the first country in Europe last year to create a law to allow for menstrual leave. Now, there are holes in it, despite being a step in the right direction. This leave is actually only available for people with pre-diagnosed conditions, like, say, for example, endometriosis. Endometriosis can take up to 8 years to diagnose, so you can kind of see the problem there. And the uptake has been low. Is the stigma perhaps too prevalent for those that need it to take it? Maybe. But perhaps the new legislation in the UK around flexible working gets closer to the support that we need as workers. But let's expand on this notion. What would it actually mean? Well, I think it means that employees are supported. They're able to manage their health conditions that affect their daily lives, as well as managing parenting around their jobs. And I believe it can empower people to make decisions, better decisions, about their bodies to avoid burnout and, in effect, work better. Now, what if we all did our bit, wherever we can, to normalise the conversation about menstruation in society? What if widening the conversation was the key to eradicating the taboo completely? Thank you very much.